Okay, picture this. You're at a major international summit, high stakes. There's this big joint declaration on the table. Everyone's expected to sign. Pens are ready. And then India's defense minister, Rajnath Singh, just doesn't. He decides not to put pen to paper. Now, if you follow global diplomacy, you know that wasn't an accident. It was very much a deliberate signal.
Absolutely. And what we're going to dive into today is really that moment. It perfectly captures India's increasingly firm line on terrorism and, well, its growing diplomatic confidence. This all played out at a recent Shanghai Cooperation Organization defense ministers meeting.
Right. So our mission today is to really unpack why. Why did he refuse to sign? We'll look at the geopolitics, the specific events leading up to it, and what this really says about India's place on the world stage now. We've got some great source material to draw on to give you the full picture.
Yeah, and to get the full impact of that refusal, we probably need to set the scene a bit with the SCO itself, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It started back in 2001, and its main focus is economic ties, strategic partnerships, and crucially, counterterrorism. But it's important to remember it's not a military alliance like NATO. That's a key difference.
And India joined as a full member in 2017, right? Same year as Pakistan, interestingly enough.
That's right.
So this particular meeting, the defense ministers one, was held in China recently, and that's where this whole thing happened. There was actually a bit of talk beforehand about whether Rajnath Singh would even go.
There was some uncertainty.
But he did attend, and the Russian defense minister was there too, which was seen as, a potentially important moment for India, China, and Russia to connect.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how things escalated, how Pakistan used this platform, this SCO meeting, to make accusations. And that sort of inadvertently, perhaps, just highlighted India's newer, firmer stance and led to this really strong pushback.
And these weren't vague complaints either, were they? Pakistan, also an SCO member, specifically accused India of, quote, terrorist acts inside Pakistan. They brought up the Kulbhushan Jadhav case again.
Yeah, the Jadhav case, which is, a really contentious point. India says he was abducted. Pakistan says he's a spy. It's complex.
And the timing of bringing this up at the SCO meeting.
That's critical. This was just 2 months after the Pahalgam incident. That was an attack back on April 22nd, and it hit hard in India. So for India, Pakistan raising this then felt, well, not just badly timed, but like a deliberate deflection.
So India didn't just let it slide. Rajnath Singh's response was pretty direct, wasn't it?
Oh, very direct, very clear. He basically said, without naming names, but clearly pointing fingers, that some countries actively nurture and shelter terrorism as state policy.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, he was unambiguous. His message was that the SCO shouldn't tolerate these double standards. He even mentioned Operation Sindhur.
Operation Sindhur.
It was described as a specific countermeasure, a retaliatory action India apparently took against terrorist infrastructure. The core message was, India has zero tolerance for terrorism, it has the right to defend itself, and any country involved needs to be held accountable, period.
Okay, so that sets up the big moment. The unsigned document. China puts forward this joint declaration, standard procedure, everyone signs to show agreement.
Sigma's consensus.
But the document didn't mention the Pahalgam incident at all, despite everything Singh had just said.
Exactly. Conspicuously absent. And what makes it even more revealing is what was included. Things like the Balochistan insurgency, the Zafar Express attacks, incidents that Pakistan frames as terrorism, but others, including India, might see very differently, like internal struggles, maybe even freedom fights.
So it looked like a deliberate choice. Include Pakistan's points, ignore India's major recent grievance.
Precisely. And that's why India drew the line. From their perspective, it looked like China trying to, smooth things over with Pakistan, essentially ignoring India's security concerns and the impact of that attack. Signing it would have meant compromising on, as the source puts it, India's self-respect.
So what happened? Did the meeting just grind to a halt? What were the consequences for China, who was hosting?
Well, the meeting itself carried on, but it was definitely awkward. China lost face, you could say. They couldn't get everyone on board for their joint statement. That doesn't look good, especially for a country trying to project leadership within the SCO.
That analogy from the source, playing hide-and-seek in a floodlit stadium, seems pretty apt then.
It really does.
Yeah.
Trying to selectively edit reality, but it was pretty obvious what was happening. And for China, which is usually so meticulous about these things, failing to get that consensus signature, it's more than just a small slip-up. It shows the limits of their influence when a major player like India decides to stand firm.
In this refusal, it wasn't just a random occurrence, was it? It seems to fit into a wider pattern of India being more assertive diplomatically.
Absolutely. It's not an isolated incident. You look at National Security Advisor Ajit Doval meeting Wang Yi in Beijing, the message was firm. Terrorism is terrorism, period.
Mm.
Whether it's Afghanistan or Pakistan doing it, no more double standards. It's a consistent line. And then you have Shashi Tharoor speaking at the Primakov readings in Russia. That's a pretty respected international forum, right?
Yes, definitely.
And he directly challenged Pakistan, playing the victim. He said India's response to terrorism meant, and I'm quoting loosely here, that these acts couldn't go unpunished, that there had to be a price. That's not just tough talk. It reflects a real shift, a refusal to be seen as, reactive or weak anymore.
And we've seen India making independent calls within the SCO before, too, haven't we?
We have, like skipping those joint military drills that were held in Pakistan back in 2018.
Right.
Or refusing to sign an SCO statement condemning Israel during the recent Israel-Iran tensions, choosing to stay neutral on that specific point. And of course, the big one is staying out of China's Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah.
These aren't small decisions. They show India prioritizing its own path.
So this all seems guided by that idea mentioned in the source, the nation-first principle.
Exactly. That seems to be the guiding philosophy. National interest comes first, above other considerations, even within these multilateral groups.
And it's not just about high-level meetings. The source material connects this to other areas, too, like cultural issues.
Yeah, it brings up examples like, I think it was a Diljit Dosanjh film release in Pakistan, or a controversy around an actress, Hania Amir, making comments after Operation Sindoor. The point being made was that sometimes national interest and respect for, say, fallen soldiers has to outweigh commercial interests, even big ones. It's about maintaining that line of national self-respect across the board.
Which ties into controlling the narrative, doesn't it? How India is perceived globally.
Absolutely critical. The source mentions the White House countering false reports about Iran's nuclear program as an example. Nations have to actively shape their image, project confidence. If you let others define you as weak or easily pushed around, that has real consequences, not just for national pride, but potentially for how your citizens are seen, too. Your voice in these forums, it reflects national strength.
Okay, so bringing it all together, what does this suggest about the next SCO summit?
Well, the next big one is planned for Tianjin in China. You'd expect Putin, Xi Jinping, Shehbaz Sharif, the usual key players.
Right.
But there's speculation, based on these recent events and China's approach, that maybe Prime Minister Modi won't attend this time.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps India might send the External Affairs Minister, Jaishankar, instead.
Why would they do that?
It could be a strategic move to avoid potential flashpoints or situations where India might feel pressured or its message diluted. It shows India is thinking very carefully about how and where it engages at the highest level, picking its moments.
So a lot to unpack there. For you listening, we've really traced India's firm line against terrorism, this more assertive, independent foreign policy, and specifically that refusal to compromise national integrity at the SCO meeting.
And it really leaves you with a question to think about. In today's world, this complex global stage, how important is it for a country to have that consistent, firm voice?
Right.
Especially when core values like security are on the line.
Yeah. What happens long term if a nation lets others control its story or dictate its actions in these international groups? We hope this deep dive gave you some insight into those shifting power dynamics and what it might mean for the future